We love them. We really appreciate them. We send them good vibes from January to May. And say a few prayers along the way. But I thought today we would actually, I didn't have a chance to talk to you, Matt, but I did talk to Rick and Janice, that because the governor actually released his proposed budget for next year, and because when Rick was here in August, he was talking to us about how difficult this upcoming year is going to be financially, that we would start with him and his insights as being a member of the Joint Budget Committee. Then we'll move to Janice and Matt. And we should have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion in this format. So get your questions ready. And at this point, we'll kick it off with Representative Rick Taggert.
Well, let me start by saying I'm not going to take you through this 3-inch binder from the governor to us in the Joint Budget Committee that took place on Friday. Friday, if you have not heard, was a royal mess. We were supposed to, the Joint Budget Committee, we went back to work again last week to work on a supplemental that you may be aware of for food for our needy people in this state, because of the fact that SNAP funds are frozen as a part of the federal shutdown. Judges have now stepped in. They stepped in on Friday to help the situation, but still we're going to be in a very difficult place until those cards are reconfigured with dollars for the month of November, and I wouldn't expect that to happen until about the 10th or maybe even later. So in the meantime, we did approve $10 million for SNAP benefits from the state, $5 million of which went out today to food banks and food pantries across the state, and $5 million more on November 15th if it's needed. And then I was able to get the governor through our JBC meetings to agree that if we needed to go beyond that, that he would do what's called a supplemental, a 1331 on November the 15th, because we cannot let people starve under any circumstances. I hope it's not necessary, but in any case, we were back there. Friday, we were supposed to meet with the governor and go through this whole binder. 20 minutes before the JBC meeting with the governor, he canceled it. And Senator Barb Kirkmeyer and I were sitting next to each other in Rotunda going, what just happened? Needless to say, I was upset, and for any of you folks that follow Colorado politics, I said to one of the reporters to drive 500 miles and have the governor 20 minutes before cancel the meeting was a little bit insulting, to say the least. Just as I finished that interview, I got a text from the governor's office that said, Rick, can we meet one-on-one? And I did. It wasn't one-on-one. It was Rick with the governor, with 10 of his staff members to go over things. That wasn't really problematic, but the whole day was messed up. I don't think Senator Kirkmeyer was able to get that one-on-one because she left the Capitol to do other things. If you don't know this, she's running for governor. She is an incredible candidate. She is smart beyond belief. So let me take you through just a couple things. I have spent the weekend reading the governor's budget and his proposed budget. And for those of you that are not aware of the process, the governor is required by statute on November 1st to provide a balanced budget to the Joint Budget Committee. Now, whether we agree whether it's balanced or not, I'll talk about a few things that I don't think it is balanced, but be that as it may, he's required to do that by November 1st. He did it on October 31st. So he met the statute. Now we go back to work, the JBC. I take off on Friday to return back to Denver full time, and we start up next week with briefings from 23 different departments. Then we'll come up with a series of questions to department heads. Some of those are what we refer to as common questions across all departments, some of which are very specific to what they're asking us for. Those briefings will go until about December the 10th to 12th. Then we'll start into hearings where the department heads will have to answer all of our questions and also present in more detail their budgets, what they think are the highest priorities of their budgets. That'll go through till about the middle of January. Then we start after that, which is what is called figure setting, where we will start actually assigning a budget to each department. That gets accumulated, condensed into the long bill, which is the budget. And then we will present that to the General Assembly. This year we'll present it to the House first, followed by the Senate afterwards. And then if it passes both houses, it will then go on to the governor for his signature or veto. So the governor presented a budget to us, and let's just talk about the general fund, because people get confused when they see a $50 million or $50 billion budget. They assume that's our general fund. It is not. The general fund is what we focus on, but not that we ignore what comes in from federal, not that we ignore the cash funds that also make up the full $50 billion. But the general fund is $18 billion in that range, okay? So what first caught my attention when the governor took me through the budget was our third quarter forecast said, in fact, that we expect forecast revenues for 26-27 to be just over $18.1 billion. Now, not to overcomplicate this, there's a part of the general fund that is not subject to reserve. So you're also going to hear a figure of $16.8 billion, which was last year's general fund, and his request is to take it to $17.1 billion. Now, the first thing that caught my attention was we only had $18 billion coming in, and he presented a budget to me of $18.6 billion. And I'm sitting there going, how does this work? How can you spend $18.6 billion when in fact we're only taking in $18.1 billion? Well, here's the answer to that. There are three components that are in his request for continued expenses that are based on these numbers. So his 18.6 includes the privatization of Pinnacle. For those of you that don't know Pinnacle, it's the workman's comp provider in this state. And he also presented that to us last year, and we in the JBC put a kibosh to it because it wasn't ready to go. It's still not ready to go. From talking to the folks at Pinnacle, they still say, Rick, we're nowhere near a conclusion. But he included $400 million there. So take the 18.1, add $400 million. Then, in addition to that, we, in 2024, have already done our Tabor rebates. But the calculation with HR 1, because our fiscal year doesn't align with the federal fiscal years, ours goes from July 1 to June 30th, and I think you know the federal is October 1st to September 30th. And so we always have this kind of strange situation. But in the case of HR 1, it brought down our revenues for not only the fiscal year 24, but it brought down our revenues for fiscal year 25 and 26. And so we had already done the rebates by way of tax year 2024. And the governor is saying we overpaid it by $150 million. So he's adding that back in as well. And then he wants to sweep $15 million from severance fees, again, away from local governments. So that's how he got to over 18.6, because those were additional revenues that he calculated to balance his situation. So my humble estimation, I don't think we can depend upon that $400 million. And I think it's equally as dangerous this year to depend on that $400 million as it was last year, because there's not a deal. And from what I understand, the deal's not close. So just assuming we have those dollars in his proposed budget, to me, is wrong. We shouldn't be doing that. So we got $400 million there. I want to see more on this overpayment of the rebate on for Tabor purposes. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment until I get into the absolute details of that, which we will. The second component that I totally disagree with him about is the fact that we have a statute that went into place, I believe, Rose, correct me, oops, or Senator Rich, I believe it went into place in either the 2021-22 budget or 22-23 budget that requires the state to have a reserve of 15%. And it gradually went up to 15%, and I think the first year that it went into effect was year 2023. I'm not sure that. It may have been 2022. 15%, and the purpose of that 15% is primarily to protect all of us in case of a recession. And I want to repeat that. In case of a recession. That's how the statute's written. The governor is proposing not only for the 25-26 budget year, but now the 26-27, that we bring that down to 13%, which would require legislation to bring it back down to 13%, with it going back up to 15%. That has an impact of $300+ million. So if you add that $600 million to that $300 million, I believe we have a deficit going into JBC. I believe we have a deficit of at least $900 million. And that worries me, to say the least, because last year we balanced the budget by reductions in operations, but of the $1.2 billion that we reduced out of the budget, it came from two sources, primary sources. One, $400 million came from sweeping cash funds. We don't have those cash funds to sweep any longer, although the governor's talking about sweeping $25 million, of which $15 million is the severance side of things. We don't have it beyond that. So there's nothing even close to $400 million. So that's not there. We also, the other big component was Back the Blue. Back the Blue, if you remember, was a Proposition 130 It passed. That has a commitment from the state of $350 million. We were able to work last year with the police chiefs on Proposition 130 to, in fact, pay that out over 10 years, and it's coming from earnings on a $500 million investment into para, because para has over the last 20 years gotten on average an 8% return on their money, over 8%. And 7%, which is all we needed, 7% allows us to pay out $35 million for Back the Blue over a 10-year period, and it does it doesn't take anything from the general fund. And I stress the police chiefs like the concept because they said, we can't take $350 million all at once, Rick. So you guys spreading it actually helps us. So they were fine with that particular approach. So if you take the $400 million that was transferred from cash funds and $350 million that came from the Back the Blue, 750 of the $1.2 billion was already saved. So we had to make up the difference. The governor is proposing in this budget a 2% reduction in operating expenses. That's $250 million. That's it. That's it. And he's heard us say in the Joint Budget Committee, not all of us, but I can assure you from Senator Barb Kirkmeyer and myself, I have said that needs to be in the 6 to 8% range. Senator Kirkmeyer would tell you 8 to 10%. I think it's probably closer to Senator Kirkmeyer's number than it was to my number. And so we got our hands full on this. There are some good components, so I don't want to throw the governor completely under the bus. They are tackling Medicaid. And we all know that the federal government has already said Medicaid is on an unsustainable path. It is definitely on an unsustainable path in our state. Medicaid budget needs have increased these last 10 years at an average of 8.5% a year. Think about that. 8.5% a year. Had the governor not taken action, and I think we need to go further, we would have been looking at an 11% increase in Medicaid this year. And all you have to do is look at the curve of Medicaid, and if it stays on the path that it's on right now, we won't be able to fully fund K through 12. We will not be able to fund higher education, and we will not be able to fund corrections. And any discretionary spending is completely gone. Some of that's probably good, but in some cases not. So they've throttled it back so that the increase that they're requesting out of us for Medicaid is 5.4%. Now, again, the governor's not taking into account that I know one of the very first things we're going to see from HCFA, Colorado Healthcare Policy and Finance, which is the group that manages Medicaid. They have a $137 million supplemental that we're going to have to deal with. So if you remember, I took you through that it added up to $900 million. Add that $137 million and you're now over $1 billion. So we got our hands full. But finishing the Medicaid with the changes they're proposing, one of which was one that I harped on and continue to harp on. We provide benefits sometimes in Medicaid that are higher than what we can buy in the market in insurance. An example of that is I'm not trying to pick on this company, but Delta is the big player in dental insurance in this state. The maximum that you can do in caps as individuals in Delta is, for Delta insurance, dental insurance, is about $1.5 to $1.6 thousand dollars a year as individuals. They don't offer one that has a cap of $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. Does anybody want to guess what the Medicaid benefit is?
Probably 10.
It's $4,000. How do we justify that? So the governor is, listen to me a little bit, and he's brought it down to $3,000. I appreciate that he was listening. I don't appreciate the fact that 3,000 should have been maybe 2. But we've got a chance in the JBC to go back after that. I'm not trying to hurt the people that depend upon Medicaid, but we can't provide benefits beyond the benefits that we can buy in the open market. We just can't do that. That's not fair to Colorado citizens. So I promised you I would not take you through this 3-ring binder, even though I spent my weekend with this 3-ring binder, and I have to, because I got to get ready to start asking some pretty tough questions. But I don't want to take up a lot of your time. If you've got questions for me, that's a lot more important than me keeping spouting off about the budget.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you know whether there's going to be cut back from the federal government grants that also could impound the budget?
We don't. We all already know there's been a significant amount of research grants to our institutions of higher education that are research institutions, and those in this state are UNC, CU, and CSU. Mesa's not a research institution. Oh, and I should say a really critical one, the School of Mines. They're already seeing substantial cuts, but they're not coming to us. They know we can't make up for those. But there could be more in addition to the SNAP. Now, I think
I was thinking like federal Medicaid that's also, because one that's on grant, isn't it, to the state?
well, Medicaid, the cuts in Medicaid at a federal level don't kick in until October of 2026, so next fall. And we have factored those in. The big one is the provider fee. The provider fee goes from 6%, and this starts in October of 2027. It, over a 5-year period, goes from 6% down to 3.5%, 0.5% each year. And quite honestly, that is going to put our rural hospitals in a terrible, terrible bind, because what happens with that Chase provider fee is it's matched by 90% federal funds. So it's ratcheted up significantly. By the time we get into year 4 and year 5 of that coming down, that's over $1 billion a year. And it's at the expense of our hospitals and clinics, because that pays for two major components. One, uncompensated care. That pays a lot for the uncompensated care. And secondly, the delta between what commercial insurance pay for a particular procedure versus what Medicaid is. Medicaid has been, the rates have been about 91% of Medicare, and Medicare is quite a bit lower than commercial. In the governor's budget, as a part of the reduction in Medicaid, he's dropping that back and suggesting that come back to 85%. Now, make no mistake, folks, we have to do something with Medicaid. We can't let it go, and they're not going to be popular decisions. I hope that helped, but that's the big one that we're most concerned about. The other big one hits us on January 31st, but it hits Colorado citizens' pocketbook, and that is we've had an extended premium tax credit that has subsidized the Colorado market for individual insurance and small company insurance. That goes away on December 31st. That is the number one issue that is causing the problem of getting a continuing resolution back in Washington. The Democrats want that to be a part of it. The Republicans are saying no, it should be clean, and that should be its own separate bill. And there is a separate bill because Jeff Hurd has introduced it. I don't know if the bill has any chance of passing, but that's what's holding things up is that the disagreement on extended tax credit. So
So if you don't mind just holding for a bit, I know we could take the whole hour and have conversation based on the wonderful information that you provided, but maybe we should give Janice and Matt a chance and then take questions. Sound good? Janice, you want to?
I'll get this back in here.
Switch out.
Okay.
Microphone too. Do you want to go ahead? Thank you so much, sweetie. Well, I don't even know how to follow that good news. It cracks me up though when the governor says we have a balanced budget. That couldn't be further from the truth. You know, there's only 2 days that the budget has to be balanced. Has to be balanced on the day he signs it, and it has to be balanced when the supplementals are approved. So the day after he signs a budget, it no longer has to be balanced. And so if you see on social media, like I have, that, oh, the budget is balanced, he is lying. He is absolutely lying about that. I was thinking about some of the things that, you know, if I were in charge, what we would do, because I think I've talked to you about this before, that, you know, when all of that federal money came in, like less than 3 years ago, there was $3.6 billion, with a B, in surplus. And during that time, 2 state departments were created, several programs were created, and 4,000 full-time employees were hired with absolutely no plan on how to sustain that. Now, I'm a big believer that last in, first out, and those things should be looked at. Now, the state departments, maybe they're successful, but some of those programs, they ought to be looked at and to see if they are actually doing what got passed in the legislature. I wish someone had the political will on the majority side to take a look at that, because it would certainly make Representative Taggert's job a whole lot easier if someone had the political will to do the responsible thing. Now, when I was invited to come here, we were going to talk about what we're going to look at for next year, but listening to Representative Taggert, my goodness, how depressing it is. I think that not only will the budget, but the health care and Medicaid will absolutely take the oxygen right out of that building. And I don't know, just like Representative Taggert, I don't know what that means for us. People think that we are going to have all the answers. And of course, we have a governor that blames every single thing on the federal government. He does not take any responsibility for what he has done with that federal money that they had. It's as though he wasn't even there and passed all of those bills. So excuse me for being a little bit upset about that, but I think that he should take some responsibility for what he has done to the state. So I'll get off that soapbox. When you are in the state legislature, each of us as legislators, we have the opportunity to have 5 bill titles. Now, we'll end up with more than those, but we start off with that each of us get to have 5. That really should be enough. Think about this. There are 100 legislators, and if we all have 5, that's 500 bills. My goodness. I'm old enough to remember when I used to update the statutes for the attorneys I worked for, you could put the whole number of books that held the Colorado Revised Statutes on one regular bookcase shelf. It now takes 2. So if you don't think we have enough laws, please tell me, let me know. Let me see a show of hands if you don't think we have enough laws on the books. So I believe that if we're only allowed to have 5, and that counts as 500, that would be okay if that's as far as we would go. I do already have my 5 bills, and like I said, I'll probably end up with more because as a senator, if a bill starts in the House and they want me to co-prime a bill in the Senate, it doesn't count against my 5. So that's how we end up sometimes on other bills, and sometimes leadership might give permission for a late bill. I've never really asked for a late bill. I think, we have enough to do without putting something in at the end of the session and bulldozing it through. But like I said, I think healthcare is going to take up quite a bit of conversation and oxygen. But we're required by the Colorado Constitution to balance the budget and to do school finance. And I don't know if I've talked to this group before because I have in other groups. Back in the 1990s and the early 2000s, we used to do school finance before we did the budget. And because we have term limits, I don't know the historical knowledge or the historical reason on why that got switched around and we do the budget first and then school finance. And this last year, it couldn't have been at a worse time. First off, the budget was late coming, and then in the last 10 days of session, we're working on school finance. And that's not the way to make good policy. So I don't know why and I know that my caucus in the Senate, we've always been asking those questions, why we don't go back to doing school finance first and then do the budget. But, we're not in charge, and we've been told on more than one occasion that they don't need us and they'll do it their way. So I'm going to be working on a bill for the district attorneys, and it will be for the District Attorneys Association, but our Mesa County District Attorney brought it to me, and it's to modify the bond hearing officer's procedures. All of these bills are still in draft form, so I'm not going to go into a lot of information about these. I did have a bill last year. It started in the House, never made it to the Senate, but because it died in House Judiciary, but it's on child rape. And if you don't know this, if your child is raped, the perpetrator might only get probation. That's it. That's state law. They have to rape that child twice to go to jail. So I was just incensed by this, and we do have strong bipartisan support. The Senator Mark Snyder, who is also an attorney, and we don't play on the same team, but he's going to co-prime this bill with me. And we're going to start it in the Senate, and we'll see if we can get this passed. I'm working with a bill with Representative Soper on the Colorado Open Records Act. This was a bill that did get vetoed by the governor last year, and so this year we're actually working with the governor to try to meet his concerns on the Colorado Open Records Act. There is a lot of abuse that goes on there. Don't get me wrong, I think the Open Records Act is very important, but I was really struck when I learned in Jefferson County, they've created a whole department for open records because they get more than 600 open records requests a year. And so they've got attorneys in an office all by themselves just trying to keep up with those open records requests. So we'll see. But then I learned in Mesa County that our office, Mesa County local government actually got 400 this last year. So I think they're good, but there is some abuse there, and we've got to have some better and stricter guardrails around there. The other bill I'm working on is a CCI priority bill, Colorado Counties, Inc. They're the association that represents the county commissioners, and it's about periodical printing to publish legal notices in non-periodical newspapers where they'll be allowed to publish electronically. And it's my understanding that even the Colorado Press now actually supports this bill. We'll see if that's true. We do have strong bipartisan support on this. Senator Dylan Roberts will carry that with me. The Mesa County Surveyor, I carried a bill with them last year. They've asked me to carry a bill for the Colorado Surveyors Association again. And this is concerning the recording and placement of survey monuments. Sometimes those monuments might end up in the middle of a road, and they want to be able to move them to the side of the road, but also make that notation. The County Clerks Association is supportive of this. And again, all of these bills are in draft form, so we'll see how that happens, comes about. You know, there are sometimes citizens will write to me and they'll have some concerns about things they hear because we have a 24/7 news cycle. And of course, one of the biggest concerns, and I believe our former Congressman Scott McGinnis certainly understands this one, is the Shoshone water right. A lot of people are now concerned about that and what's going to happen there. And it's so important for you to educate yourself on that one and make sure that we keep the Shoshone water right on the western slope. This one I didn't really know. I'd never even heard about this, but people are concerned about river access for boating and loading. And someone that knows a little bit more about that is going to have to tell you about that one. But then there's also this coordinated state-level system to support out-of-state educational orphans, child in state custody who do not meet residency definitions. Now, I believe that's if we are funding a child in Colorado and they go to another state, we're still responsible for that. So that's another thing that people have talked about. I did meet with a gentleman who really wanted me to draft a resolution to assure the safety of public servants and the general public, to turn the temperature down on hateful rhetoric within the public dominion. I believe, I don't know about Representative Taggert. I know that I heard Representative Soper say he's been threatened. I know that I've been threatened, and I'm sure former Representative Puglisi has received threats as well. But it is time that we try to turn down the temperature a little bit on those. December 1st is going to be the deadline to request bill titles, at least on 3 bills. So I already have my 5, so I'll meet that deadline. January 9th is when we have to at least let, for us in the Senate, the Secretary of the Senate, know what bill is a pre-filing. What I mean by that is that when it's read across the desk on the day we go back, it'll be one of the first bills that gets assigned to committee. January 14th, we're going back on the first day of legislative session. Ought to be a great day. But I do want you to know, it continues to be an honor to represent you in the Colorado State Senate. 2026 will be my last year in my first term. I have filed my paperwork to run for a second and final term. And I hope the voters agree that I have done a good job and will give me the opportunity to continue to represent Senate District 7 in a second term in the Colorado State Senate. I want to address something that the chair of the Republican Party asked about, and it has to do, I had to look this up because it's been a couple of sessions since we did this bill about ballot access for candidates with disabilities. This is not a bill that I supported. And I didn't support it, but not because I don't want everyone to have access, but this is where I thought, well, the trial lawyers support this, and you can imagine why they might support this. But one of the things that I thought was, when a precinct caucus or party assembly occurs in a geographic location that lacks broadband internet service, participation must be allowed by an alternative means, such as a telephone. Now, with all of these different locations for precinct caucus, if we're in buildings that like are closed for the day and you don't know what their Wi-Fi is, maybe it is going to have to be by phone. I don't know. But it's unfortunate. There's a lot of unintended consequences when bills like this come forward. And good luck with that. You know, that's all I can say about it. I don't know.
They're worried about lawsuits, that if you don't meet their definition,
I know.
you know, we will be.
You will be sued. And like I
How
said,
do you have how many phones and texts from all over your county?
I know.
So it'll be interesting.
I know. Former Representative Puglisi said it would be great if the state party would help with this, but I don't even know how the state party helps with the entire state on this. You know, this is going to be massive. And I believe there's a lot of unintended consequences. And when I heard that the trial lawyers were involved, it became an easy no for me, you know, because they always have an ulterior motive for these things. So, but it became law, and you know, I don't know, I don't have the answer for this.
Well,
Maybe
well,
Representative Soper does, but I don't.
As we get information, we'll let everybody know how the state's gonna handle it, but, yeah, there's gonna, you know, it's one of those mandates, kinda like we're dealing with everything, that, oh, here it is, you guys deal with the.
An unfunded
the
mandate, an unfunded mandate, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. I know that I've got someone right here ready to pull the plug.
Thanks, Janice. It's just, I do want to make sure that we get to all of our state representatives, and so last but certainly not least, would you join me in welcoming Representative Soper?
Thank you, and I was told to put this on first.
Oh, that's part of it. He's got it.
Here's a magnet site if you want the magnet.
Perfect. Thank you. It's a real honor to be able to be in front of everyone today. As we approach 2026, this will be my final session in the State House, and it's certainly been the honor of a lifetime to represent each and every one of you in this room. It really is special to be able to go to Denver each week. It's a challenge as well. But I think about each and every one of your faces as I walk up those granite steps into the state capitol, and I'm saying a prayer in my head that we make wise decisions as we go forward. Certainly the Capitol is a really challenging place, so for my successor, I wish you the best. I want to tell you a story. It's a story that happened incredibly recently, within the last few hours, as a matter of fact. You save, you put food away, and then you start hearing a pitter-patter, and you start seeing trails of mice droppings, and you realize that your entire pantry has been raided, and that dog food is missing, that your cereal box is completely empty. And I thought about how this compares to the legislature, that We have a lot in our state who like to be freeloaders. And we have to make really, really tough decisions to get rid of that. So we made really tough decisions. It actually was really easy to put out mouse traps. And we caught 3 mice this morning. I say that because we have 65,000 state employees, but 7,000 of those have been added under the watch of Jared Polis. I agree with what Senator Rich said. We need to look at reducing our state numbers. Private business, when you go through a restructuring, you are able to lay off employees. Why is it that when the state has a budget crisis, we're never, ever, ever talking about reducing the number of employees we have? And everyone should know that this is part of business, whether it's private business or the public's business. I want to turn to talking about the 26th session. I, just like Senator Rich and Representative Taggert, certainly have my bills lined up, although they're certainly not final, that's for sure. But I do want to highlight several that I am working on. One is an issue that was brought to me last session. And you kind of start working on bills for the next session and the session you're in, I found. But it was a reporter from 9 News who had started to identify a trend, a very disturbing trend, that incredibly violent offenders who had been released on parole, or early release, were going out and committing very violent murders, including the stabbings that occurred on the 16th Street Mall, which has been renamed just 16th Street at a massive cost to taxpayers, by the way. So we began asking for the risk assessments and the crons. So those are the tools that the parole board uses to evaluate whether someone should be released. Certain facts have been altered. So for example, there's a question that asks, has this individual ever committed a crime under the age of 18? The older risk assessment said yes, the newer risk assessment said no. You could go down the list on these static facts, and there was very much a pattern of change. And this is very, very, very disturbing, because you add up the score at the bottom, and that's how they were able to be released early. So I began doing some independent research by asking for data from the state departments. First, DOC told me no. Luckily, Judicial has some similar information. And out of the 700 murders that occurred in 2024, 71 of those were committed by early release parolees. So we started doing some more inquiries. We asked DOC for the risk assessments of all 71. They told us no, that we would need to file a CORA, and they were looking at about $8,000 to charge us. We worked a little bit with DOC to have them try to provide a few samples out of the 71 so there wasn't a cost. And the samples have revealed that the pattern has still been there. So we're working on a bill to try to address this to really protect the public safety. So if I end up dead, just like a John Grisham novel, you can blame DOC.
No, please not.
Yeah. I am also going to be taking on another bill that I had tried last session, and it failed. And it concerns failure to appear. So we have a real problem in our state, and it's not a large population, but it is a significant population that they'll be arrested. Usually there'll be a low-level charge. Then they won't show up to their court date. They'll get a failure to appear arrest warrant issued. Then they'll go for a number of months. They'll be arrested on a new charge. They won't show up. They'll get a failure to appear because of a personal recognizance bond. The problem there is not just bad for society, but it's also bad for the individual not to conclude their case. And we would like to say that after 2 failures to appear, the court may impose a cash-only bond for the purpose of holding that person in detention until their trial date. This is one that we certainly struggled with House Judiciary. It's a very brutal committee. Just like Senator Rich alluded to with her bill, there's a lot of really good legislation that the Democrats on House Judiciary, for whatever reason, just don't really see that anyone should be held accountable. And it's been quite frustrating, but we're going to give it another try because I believe this is a conversation worth having, and it's one that we need to undertake to protect citizens. Another issue that has been coming up more so in recent years has been the issue of counterfeit fruit, particularly Palisade peaches. So I'll tell you the fact pattern. You'll have someone in, say, March selling peaches that says Palisade grown, Colorado peaches. Well, if you know anything about peaches here in Colorado, you know that's impossible. But it certainly is deceiving to the public. What's also deceiving to the public is you have some large grocery stores that will buy just enough Palisade peaches to be able to build this nice display. You know, it'll say something like, the farmer's name, grown in Colorado, big Colorado Proud sign. And then they start buying peaches from other locations like Oregon, Washington, California, Mexico. But they leave the grown in Colorado there. And so we want to say that, look, just be honest with consumers. Don't advertise that it's grown in Colorado when it's not. And we want to add this to our consumer protection laws. Then lastly, it's the issue that I can't seem to get away from. It concerns updates to our funeral legislation. I have so far been involved in 7 different bills concerning the death care industry. And what we did 2 years ago was we required licensure. So the first time in 41 years that anyone working in the funeral industry will need to be licensed. We were the last state to do so. And what happened was a lot of bad actors from other states came to Colorado. And you don't want to be the last of anything. And I remember specifically as we were negotiating, kicking out the full implementation date by an extra year. And someone said to me, Matt, why would you do that? And I said, well, first of all, it's a really big change, so it's good to have a really long runway of 2 years. But secondarily, it gives us time if we miss something, we can go back and make sure we address that. Well, what we have now learned, given the fact that we've gone through 1 year of that runway, is that there are some issues that funeral directors have come to us about, and they've said, we really would like you guys to define some terms in legislation. Not because we don't trust you as an individual or trust the individuals with DORA, this is the agency that does the regulations, but we're concerned about who the people are in your shoes next. And we're really concerned on how they're going to interpret things, that we want to have some protections built into statute. And we also want to make sure that the mom and pop funeral homes can still operate and that it can still be a smooth transition. And that's why we saved a bill title to be able to work on that. We have a few key things, such as defining what is a satellite location. We made reference to it, but never defined it. We also made reference to the fact that there is an inspector report, but is that public or not public? And what could be made public? Then the number of hours from your peer reviewer to look at. While we did define the number of hours, we didn't necessarily define some of the details that go under that. So we have a really good process, but we also need to fine tune it. And that's also why it's called the Colorado Revised Statutes. We constantly have a job to revise. And if we got it right, that's great, but it's also good to know that there does need to be some tweaking and fine tuning that occurs. With that, I certainly don't want to get the hook from Diane. So I will leave ample time for questions, and I hope everyone, well, maybe not everyone, but I hope someone has a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. If I can get the two of you, Rick and Janice, to join us, we probably have maybe about 5-7 minutes for a couple of questions, so fire away. Yes.
Just a quick one. Where does, and I pity these people that have come many times, young people, children that have come across the border. Where does what's going on in Colorado, how is that impact of money still? Is it still big for our state or not for our state? And what can we do? Schools are still overloaded, hospitals, I know St. Joseph is seeing them over and over and over again.
The bill to protect our immigrant population went through, I believe, in 23. The Colorado for All legislation. I know in the HICVA budget, they're proposing trimming some of that. I haven't been able to completely absorb that. But it's a significant amount of dollars. There's no question about it. And it's not all in one particular bucket, as you point out, because some of it impacts school. Now, school numbers in the Front Range in particular are down significantly, and one of the reasons being given right now is that a good amount of that population has left Colorado for fear. I don't know, it hasn't come to us yet. This is where the School Finance Act becomes pretty critical. But it won't have a significant impact this year because still with the new formula, it's a 3-year averaging. So we won't be able to pick up that number right away this year. But it's still a significant amount of dollars.
Thank you.
Maybe time for one more question? Yes.
David Moran, HD 54 chairperson. Thank you for your service. We're going to miss you, truly.
Thank you.
And I hope that Candace step up and do just as much legislation as you did. That's good. I have a concern that has to do with, as you well know, the geomagnetic disturbances that were affecting our electrical grid system. In particular, I'd like to go ahead and see that Candy Graff's HD Representative 22, District 22, his proposal to go ahead and ground all our transformers from geomagnetic disturbance, in particular the E3 effects, be passed. And I would love to see any kind of additional legislation we could put on the PUC, as well as any other regulations to go ahead and protect our way of life from our frail electrical grid system. If you want to go ahead and have a solution, I have a $60 billion untapped resource that we could go ahead and talk about. I'll be more than happy to share them, so we as the GOP do have a solution to go ahead and bring in and get our country or our state up to normal. I have gone ahead and pitched an idea Thursday of our project to Silicon Valley, to you name it, Black Rock. It's been very positive. So I would like to go ahead and update you on that. Anyway, good job, keep it up. Congratulations. No questions.
I was just gonna say, was there a question in there?
No.
Okay. All right, well, again, let's give our hardworking legislators a round.